There is a moment when everything you've been holding together begins to crack. Not because you're weak, but because the woman you've been pretending to be can no longer contain who you're becoming. You feel it in your bones, in the way ordinary moments suddenly feel unbearable, in how the life that once fit now suffocates. This is not anxiety whispering false warnings. This is your soul recognizing what Carl Jung understood about the human psyche, that certain thresholds, once crossed, make return impossible. The transformation is no longer coming. It's already here, dismantling everything you thought was permanent. What lies ahead is not a gentle renovation of your existing life. It's a complete metamorphosis. The kind that reshapes you from the inside out until the woman who walks through tomorrow bears only a faint resemblance to the one reading these words now. And the most terrifying part, you cannot stop it. You can only choose whether to fight against the current or learn to breathe underwater. This moment marks the end of one existence and the beginning of another. And there is no going back to who you were before you understood what was happening to you. Jung spent his life studying these ruptures in human consciousness, the moments when the psyche can no longer maintain its carefully constructed facades. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and survival. But he also knew that this process arrives uninvited, often in the form of crisis, collapse, or unbearable tension between your outer life and inner truth. You didn't choose this timing. The transformation chose you, at precisely the moment when staying the same became more painful than the risk of complete change. Perhaps you've noticed how time itself feels different now. Hours stretch and compress in ways that make no logical sense. You sit in familiar rooms and feel like a stranger, watching your own life from a distance you can't quite bridge. This temporal distortion is not imagination. It's your consciousness beginning to operate from a different frequency, one that no longer aligns with the world you've inhabited for so long. Jung understood this phenomenon as the psyche's preparation for rebirth, the way your entire system must recalibrate before it can hold the expanded version of who you're becoming. The first thing that will crumble is the structure you built to keep yourself safe. Not the physical walls of your home or the details of your daily routine, but something far more fundamental, the identity you've shown to the world. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to navigate social expectations and survive in a world that rarely rewards authenticity. For years, perhaps decades, you perfected this mask. You learned exactly how much softness to show, how much anger to swallow, how to smile when your heart was breaking, how to accept the unacceptable without flinching. You became so skilled at performing this version of yourself that you almost forgot it wasn't real. But the persona has an expiration date. There comes a moment when the gap between who you're pretending to be and who you actually are becomes so wide that maintaining the performance requires more energy than you possess. This is where you are now. The mask is cracking and no amount of effort will repair it. You'll try at first, desperately attempting to hold together the image that once protected you. You'll wake up exhausted from the effort of pretending, confused about why everything that used to work now feels impossible. This exhaustion is not failure. It's your psyche's way of forcing you to stop lying to yourself. The relationships in your life will be the first to reveal the magnitude of what's changing. Some people will sense the shift before you've even named it, and they'll begin to pull away, unsettled by something they can't quite identify. Others will double down on their expectations of you, trying to force you back into the shape they need you to hold. But here's what Jung understood that most people don't. Evolution is not a group activity. Your transformation will happen whether or not the people around you approve, whether or not they understand, whether or not they stay. And the hardest truth of all is that you will not have the strength to carry them through this with you. You're barely going to make it through yourself. Who are you losing? Not just the people, though, that loss will cut deep. You're losing the version of yourself who could tolerate what can no longer be tolerated. The woman who bent until she nearly broke, who smoothed over tension at the cost of her own peace, who carried everyone else's emotional weight until she forgot what lightness felt like. She is dying, and you need to let her go. This is the sacrifice Jung spoke of when he described psychological transformation. To become whole, you must release the parts of yourself that were never truly yours to begin with, the aspects constructed from fear, obligation, and the desperate need to belong. What Jung called the shadow will emerge during this process with undeniable force. All the rage you swallowed, all the desires you denied, all the truths you pushed down because they were inconvenient or unacceptable. They're rising to the surface now. You might find yourself thinking thoughts that shock you, feeling anger that seems disproportionate, wanting things you've never allowed yourself to want. This is not regression or moral failure. This is integration. The parts of yourself you exiled are demanding recognition, and they will not be denied any longer. The transformation cannot complete until you acknowledge every piece of who you are, even the pieces that make you uncomfortable. There will be moments of profound grief in this process. You'll miss her, the woman you're leaving behind. You'll remember times when she knew exactly what to do, how to please, how to disappear when necessary, how to make herself small enough to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. She served a purpose once. She kept you alive when survival required compliance. But survival is no longer enough. Your soul is demanding more than just existence. It's demanding truth, even if that truth dismantles everything you've built. This grief is necessary. Let yourself feel it. Cry for the years you spent contorting yourself into shapes that weren't yours. Mourn the relationships that were only possible because you weren't fully yourself in them. Acknowledge the career, the role, the entire life structure that was erected on the foundation of a false identity. When that foundation crumbles, everything built on top of it will fall, and it should. Nothing authentic can grow from dishonest ground. But even as one woman dies, another is already awakening. She's been there all along, buried under years of conditioning and compromise, waiting for the moment when the noise would finally quiet enough for you to hear her voice. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to be afraid of your own power, your own desires, your own boundaries, your own rage. Jung called this process individuation because it's about claiming your individual truth, the one that exists independent of every external expectation. The signs of her emergence are already visible if you know where to look. You can't sit through conversations that once seemed normal but now feel hollow. You can't pretend to care about things that no longer matter. You can't smile when you mean no, can't stay when you mean leave, can't continue performing a version of harmony that exists only in other people's comfort. This isn't rebellion, it's recognition. You're finally seeing clearly after years of looking through distorted glass, and yes, this new version of you will be frightening, even to yourself. She doesn't ask permission before speaking. She doesn't justify her boundaries or apologize for taking up space. She doesn't negotiate her worth or wait for external validation to know she matters. She simply is, completely and unapologetically. And this level of authenticity feels almost dangerous after a lifetime of careful self-monitoring. But danger and freedom often look identical from a distance. What you're actually afraid of is not her power, but the consequences of claiming it. There's a paradox at the heart of this transformation that Jung explored throughout his work. You must lose yourself to find yourself. The version of you that's dying feels like your entire identity, your whole life, everything you've ever known. Letting her go feels like annihilation, and in a sense it is. But what's being annihilated is not you. It's the constructed self, the adaptive self, the self that learned to survive by becoming what others needed. Beneath that constructed identity lies your true nature, and it has been waiting your entire life for this moment of emergence. The death you're experiencing is not an ending, it's a revelation. Every transformation demands payment. You need to understand the currency before you cross this threshold, not to prepare you to turn back, but to prepare you to move forward with your eyes open. You will lose people, not everyone, but some, and not necessarily the ones you expect. Some will leave because they preferred the version of you that needed them, that deferred to them, that made them feel important by being less than you actually are. Others will leave because your evolution triggers their own unexamined pain, and they're not ready to face it. Their departure will hurt, but trying to shrink yourself back down to keep them will hurt more. You will lose security, the kind that comes from predictability and routine. The life you've built has a certain rhythm, a known shape, even if that shape no longer fits who you're becoming. Transformation shatters that predictability. For a time, perhaps a long time, you won't know what comes next. You won't know who you'll be when this is over, what you'll want, where you'll go, what will matter. The ground will feel unsteady beneath your feet because the ground is unsteady. You're in the middle of an earthquake, and earthquakes don't offer stability. They offer the opportunity to rebuild on more honest foundations. You will lose approval, and this might be the hardest price of all. The people who praised your patience will criticize your boundaries. Those who admired your selflessness will accuse you of selfishness when you stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of their comfort. You'll be called difficult, changed, cold, too much, not enough. And here's what you need to understand. They're right. You have changed. You are no longer the woman who could be everything to everyone while being nothing to herself. But their assessment of that change says far more about them than it does about you. Jung warned about this resistance, both internal and external. He understood that most people fear individuation because it requires leaving behind the known for the unknown, trading the prison of other people's expectations for the terrifying freedom of self-determination. Many choose the prison. They spend their entire lives in comfortable captivity, and so never realizing they held the key all along. But you don't have that option anymore. The door has already opened, and the life you knew is on the other side of a threshold you cannot uncross. So how do you move through this without completely falling apart? Not by avoiding the pain, that's certain. The dissolution is part of the process, not something to be prevented. Jung wrote about the necessity of chaos and transformation. The way true change requires a period where everything feels lost, scattered, unrecognizable. You're in that period now, or about to be. Your task is not to resist the chaos, but to develop enough internal structure to hold yourself, while the external structures collapse. Accept the disorientation. For weeks or months you will not know who you are. You won't recognize yourself in the mirror, won't understand your own reactions, won't be able to predict what you'll want or need from one day to the next. This is normal. You're not losing your mind. You're losing your old mind, the one built on assumptions that are no longer true. A new way of understanding yourself and the world is forming, but it's not fully formed yet. In the meantime, you exist in the space between identities, and that space feels like free fall because that's exactly what it is. Protect this process with silence, not secrecy, but discretion. The urge to explain what's happening to you will be strong, especially when people notice the changes and demand explanations. Resist this urge. Speaking about transformation before it's complete scatters the energy you need to sustain it. Most people won't understand anyway. They'll try to fix you, talk you down from the ledge, convince you that what you're feeling is temporary insanity rather than permanent awakening. Save your words. Let your transformation speak for itself once it's done. Guard yourself against external opinions. Everyone will have thoughts about who you're becoming, and most of those thoughts will be rooted in who they need you to be for their own comfort. Their fear will masquerade as concern. Their resistance will present as wisdom. They'll tell you you're making a mistake, acting rashly, not thinking clearly. They might be right about the not thinking clearly part. You can't think clearly during an earthquake, but that doesn't mean the earthquake is wrong. It means the old ground was unstable and the shaking is revealing what was already broken. You may find yourself drawn to solitude in ways you never were before. This is not depression or withdrawal, though others might call it that. It's your psyche creating the space it needs to reorganize itself. Jung understood solitude as essential to transformation, the way a seed must be alone in the dark earth before it can push toward light. Your need for quiet, for distance, for time away from the demands and opinions of others, this is not weakness, it's wisdom. Your system knows what it requires to complete this metamorphosis, and it's asking you to honor that knowledge even when it makes no sense to anyone else. Trust the fertile chaos. This is perhaps Jung's most crucial insight about transformation. Before new life can emerge, the old must decompose. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by trying harder to be a better caterpillar. It dissolves completely in the cocoon, breaks down into something unrecognizable, and only then reorganizes into an entirely new form. You are in the cocoon now. Everything feels dark and uncertain because you're literally between forms. The woman you were is dissolving. The woman you're becoming hasn't fully emerged. This middle space is excruciating and essential. Do not rush it. Do not try to force clarity before it's time. Let yourself be formless for as long as it takes. And what waits for you on the other side of this dissolution? Not the life you had, that's certain. Not the relationships that required your smallness to function. Not the roles that were only available to the masked version of you. All of that will be gone, and good riddance. What remains, what emerges, is something you haven't experienced in so long you might not even recognize it at first. Authenticity. The woman who walks out of this transformation will be whole, not perfect. Healed in some ways, still wounded in others, but no longer pretending the wounds don't exist. She will be free, not in the sense of having no responsibilities or challenges, but free from the exhausting performance of being someone she's not. She will be true, not in the sense of always being right or always being kind, but true to herself, to what she actually thinks and feels and wants and refuses. People will say she's changed, and they'll mean it as an accusation. Let them. You have changed. The woman who could be ignored, dismissed, taken for granted, that woman is dead. In her place stands someone who knows her own worth without needing external confirmation, who speaks her truth without softening it for others' comfort, who walks away from what doesn't serve her without guilt or explanation. Is she harder than you used to be? Perhaps. But she's also more honest. Is she less accommodating? Absolutely. But she's more at peace. This peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of integrity, the alignment between who you are internally and who you show externally. For the first time in years, maybe decades, maybe ever, these two versions match. There's no gap to maintain, no performance to sustain, no mask to repair. The exhaustion of that constant vigilance finally lifts. Replaced by a different kind of tired, the satisfying fatigue that comes from living fully rather than the soul-crushing depletion of constant self-betrayal. Jung spoke of the self with a capital S, that deeper center of being that exists beyond ego, beyond role, beyond all the identities we construct to navigate the world. The transformation you're moving through is ultimately about finding your way to that self, to the part of you that has remained unchanged beneath all the changing circumstances of your life. It's been there all along, this core of truth, this essential you. The metamorphosis is not creating something new. It's stripping away everything false until only the real remains. And the real, once revealed, is unshakable. It doesn't need defending, doesn't require validation, doesn't bend to accommodate other people's discomfort. Your new life will feel simultaneously more solitary and more full. More solitary because you've released the relationships that were only possible through your self-abandonment, because you no longer seek crowds that don't truly see you, because you've discovered that being alone is vastly preferable to being unseen in company. But also more full, because the space you've cleared by letting go of what wasn't real now has room for what is. Fuller because you're finally present in your own life instead of watching it happen from behind a protective wall. Fuller because you're experiencing your actual emotions, thoughts, and desires instead of the carefully curated versions deemed acceptable. Jung wrote that looking outward we dream, but looking inward we awaken. You are waking up, not to a gentle sunrise that gradually illuminates familiar landscapes, but to a jarring awareness that everything you thought was solid was actually made of shadows and wishes and other people's projections. The awakening is harsh, disorienting, often unwanted. But it's also the only way to live a life that's actually yours rather than a life that happens to you while you're busy being who everyone else needs. This transformation you're moving through is not a crisis, though it will feel like one. It's not a breakdown, though much will break. It's a becoming, the painful, necessary process of shedding every false skin until only truth remains. And truth, while often uncomfortable, is the only foundation strong enough to build a real life upon. Everything you lost along the way, every person who couldn't travel this far with you, every version of yourself you had to release, all of it was the price of admission to authenticity. And authenticity, once claimed, is worth every loss, every tear, every moment of terrifying uncertainty. You're not reading these words by accident. You're here because some part of you already knows what's coming, has maybe already started, and you're looking for confirmation that you're not losing your mind, that what you're feeling is real and necessary and survivable. So let this be that confirmation. Yes, everything is about to change. Yes, it will be harder than you imagine and more liberating than you can currently fathom. Yes, you will lose things and people you thought you couldn't live without. And yes, you will discover that you not only can live without them, but can finally live because of their absence. The metamorphosis is here. Your task now is not to control it, to direct it, or understand it fully before it happens. Your task is to surrender to it, to let yourself be unmade so you can be remade, to trust that the chaos is not random destruction but purposeful transformation. The woman you're becoming is already inside you, has always been there, waiting for this exact moment when the gap between pretense and truth became unbearable enough to finally close. If you're feeling this shift in your bones, if these words are landing somewhere deeper than intellectual understanding, you're not alone in this transformation. Subscribe to continue exploring these profound changes together. And leave a comment sharing what you're ready to release as you step into who you're truly becoming. Your awakening matters, and your voice in this space creates connection for others walking the same path toward authentic existence.